Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast, brought to you by Platform 195. We share trends and strategies across retail media to help you accelerate your brand growth. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson. Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson, founder and CEO of Platform 195. Today, we have the honour of welcoming Roger Dunn, a paramount figure in the world of e-commerce and retail media. As the first person in Australia to be Amazon advertising certified and the visionary behind the establishment of Critteo's retail media business in ANZ, Roger boasts an illustrious career that spans over 2 decades. His leadership stints at esteemed organisations such as Group M Commerce, Critteo and Ubiquity provide a testament to his profound influence and prowess in the industry. And with unparalleled expertise in retail media strategy, SaaS digital solutions and agency-side innovation, Roger has cemented his place as a luminary in the field in Australia. His contributions, particularly his work at the intersection of media and commerce, combined with his commitment as a founding member of the IAB Retail Media Committee, showcase his relentless drive to shape and redefine the future of retail media. Welcome, Roger, to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Look, why don't you tell us a bit about that journey? That's the one I always open with because it's always fascinating to see how people have got here. Tell us a bit about how you've managed to get into this retail media world.
Yeah, sure. I guess I've been over in Australia and where it's been happening for me, but working my way up through the agency sort of holdco, initially at Mediacom and then up into Group M, as you mentioned. So while at Mediacom, we built a digital shelf analytics solution, which is very FMCG focused and looking at those grocery retailers for them. And then we developed that into the Group M commerce offering locally. And that was obviously around the launch of Amazon in market as well. So they arrived in 2017 and launched their ad business the next year. So there was work, building that JBP out with them as a whole co. And then other players, obviously like Cartology, one of the earlier movers here from Woolworths. So yeah, that was kind of where I started on the demand side, if you like, for retail media. Then I moved over to Critteo to launch that retail media business locally. So obviously on the tech and more supply side in that case. So working with the retailers to stand up their programs. And then, as you mentioned, more recently, a project at Ubiquity, which was helping them build their retail media solution. So they obviously come at it working with the brands to help them be much more efficient and follow best practice around the space. So obviously just looking at retail media as a sizable and increasingly sizable investment portion of those brands' kind of media budgets. And then most recently joined CitrusAd, which is one of the leaders locally. So yeah, excited to get going in that one, which is relatively new, but obviously another in the technology space and looking more at the wider APJ region, which is exciting.
So yeah, tell us about the region. Obviously Australia in particular, because obviously the APAC thing's more recent, but tell us a bit about that, how that evolution of retail media is happening in Australia has happened. Is it evolved? Is it just literally the last few years it's sort of taken off? What's the uptake?
Yeah, well, I think as in other markets, Amazon have certainly been a catalyst in terms of coming into market and introducing their offering, and that aligns locally, obviously a little later than other markets as it's a later market for them. So 2017, 2018, I guess, is when it really got started. Then the grocery players obviously tipped in, with CitrusAd powering that and building out, that core category really, because that is one of the key categories for retail media, as you know. There's, a competition for that shelf space from FMCG and CPG brands, and it really adds value when you can secure a better position. I think eBay obviously has been the number one marketplace, for many years, and is still up there with Amazon at the top. They've always had an in-house solution in retail media as well, and yeah, I'm sure we'll see many more. There's new networks launching all the time, and many retailers are kind of just exploring the space as well.
That's good to see. I think, and what about Asia Pacific? Have you sort of seen much going on there? Because obviously that's people talk about Asia Pacific, but it's actually sort of 16 or so very different markets.
Well, that's the thing. I think it was my early observations. Yeah, and you've mentioned there that they're very different markets, different languages across different markets. And even things like the alphabet used is important when you're trying to adapt a technology to a certain market. But yeah, there's certainly some big players. I think the key ones are probably going to be places like India, Korea, Japan, as kind of more mature in terms of digital. Obviously, many of those Asian markets are app first and app focused. So that requires, a certain approach, and, real estate on an app screen is obviously probably less than a desktop screen. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some nuances there, but very exciting space across the region, to be honest. There's, a lot of appetite, a lot of interest. And as you see in any market, once one or two big ones get launched, then suddenly it becomes a competitive space, and retailers feel like they need to, be on parity at least.
Yeah. Do you find that there's we've certainly seen it in some of our clients in the travel space, but just around a desire to sort of try and build it themselves rather than take third-party tech? Is that a sort of trend in Asia?
I mean, if you look at the real giants in Asia, if you think Alibaba or ByteDance, then, they're the kind of companies which you'd imagine, are and could, develop further their own builds in terms of retail media. But there is, it's that perennial question between buy or build, isn't it? Do you want to get going quickly and get started with someone who has experience, or do you want to probably take a bit longer and build your own and perhaps take a slightly higher margin, but, with all the risks built into that in terms of delivering a good product that, not only delivers for your business, but delivers for suppliers and delivers for the shopper on the site as well, and doesn't let anyone down. And, there's a, inherent amount of risk, when you're interfering, if you like, in terms of introducing new elements on the site and building out different formats.
So tell us about that sort of interplay then between retail media and e-commerce. Is that, how is that evolving in terms of how e-commerce teams are viewing retail media, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think if your goal as an e-commerce team is to increase sales via online channels, then naturally it's a very powerful lever and tool within that space. So if you have a budget and you're trying to drive some online sales, then it's probably a good place to start in terms of assessing opportunities. So I think we've seen in some of the bigger FMCGs, for example, where the e-commerce team might be the first team sort of to be involved in the space, perhaps with an online only retailer to begin with. But increasingly that team has then either expanded or just been, sort of amalgamated into the broader team and that experience to ensure that the whole team really understands online and is able to invest time and, I guess, media budgets into that space.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that integration of people who have been in e-commerce teams where retail media has been a key element of that revenue, the more those people end up in teams that don't necessarily have that experience, the better, because they understand how the two can play together. And rather than it sort of be continually be deprioritized as a sort of nice to have,
that's right.
The more it starts to become well, this is just a core piece of what we need to do. So let's get it done and get it on the prioritization list. Because once it's integrated, a lot of this technology for retail, actually the partnerships teams can get on with it, can't they? Just, the media teams can get on with selling, because the platforms will help them deliver that across the space without bothering the e-commerce teams. That's
right. And that is probably one of the big trends in retail media, is the development of the platforms and the self-serve nature of it. Obviously that makes it much easier to implement it from a retailer's perspective, but introduce a service and a platform that is very easy for brands and agencies to use themselves. And that is the whole point, is really to take the friction out of it, to make sure it's easy to buy and straightforward to plan and, look at your results as well. But there is a journey to go on. And, those teams need to start somewhere. It probably needs to be incubated to start with if you're new into the space, to get some specialism and to get a core team that knows what they're talking about. And then it usually becomes democratized, where that experience is shared within the broader team, and then it becomes every day. And, the way we're going with some of the forecasts for retail media, if it's going to become the third channel taking over linear TV, then it's probably an important one for everyone to be across if they're in, the world of investing in media and understanding what media channels are driving.
So I haven't seen that stat. Has that recently come out? Is that via the IAB?
I think that was a WARC study. I read that one in, but yeah, there's digital overall. I think search was second, and then retail media was due to overtake linear TV, I think, in the next couple of years.
Incredible.
Obviously, that's linear TV, and CTV is obviously catching up as well.
That's going to take
that split out is happened.
But it's obviously connected TV targeting retail media data sets as well. So there's a kind of blend in there, isn't there? So obviously, Australia is just an amazing market when it comes to very strong at marketing, very strong creatively, very strong from a media point of view. Are you seeing any brands do some really nice activity in this space? Or is it still just sort of buying sponsored listings and getting on the shelf?
Well, I think, as in most markets, the majority of spend is still on the bottom end of the funnel with those sponsored products and usually hardworking placements. They're easy to justify. And obviously, if you're talking about driving someone to a transaction, then that is the moment of truth when they're looking for the product on the shelf. So that's definitely the focus still. I think, we'll see it connect more into CTV and those areas and formats that are much more branding focused, and they'll have creative solutions. Then there'll be creative, formats, but also the creative itself within those formats will need to be, suitable for those environments and therefore much more interesting. I think as we plug more into social channels as well, there'll be obviously an opportunity to reach people in those environments, and the creative will need to be, interesting and, attractive in the feed. So I think that'll be a place where more creativity will happen. And then I've seen the opposite as well. So trends in social becoming a curated bundle. Say, if there's a recipe that's going crazy on TikTok, that bundle of products that is part of that trend can then be sold on the retailer and packaged up into a curated bundle for shoppers there. So, works both ways.
Interesting. It'd be interesting to see as brands do create that, embrace this whole creative opportunity, so when they start pushing brand spend into retail media, that's really it's almost an evolution. We've sort of seen it. I've seen it in past with, certainly when we were doing it at Thomas Cook, it started with all the sponsored listings, all the sort of standard stuff. And then, by the end of it, we were doing TV production for brands and, targeted at data. And we were doing rebranding for destinations and, things that would be totally outside the realm of a retailer. But it's the natural evolution of it, is that full sort of creative and content service. And if you can do things like agencies do with, testing against data and, but your data is obviously much better, then actually you start to actually become much more appealing from a creative point of view. And you hire the right, obviously, creatives. You become much more appealing to the brands from a creative production point of view. But let's get back. Sorry, go.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say with retail media, obviously the on-site stuff is owned and operated inventory as well as the retailer's data. But if you think about what retail media is off-site, really it is just the data of the retailers, and then it can become any channel. So any channel that you use on your plan, currently, can just become a little bit more smarter or a bit more accountable. And you might use it differently because of that knowledge, but it's inherently, those same formats and those same opportunities to create, ads that through.
Yeah, and I think you suddenly end up with infinite inventory and many different sort of creative opportunities, don't you? Let's talk about the creative thing, because you obviously had that experience in monetizing owned assets and first-party data for them. How are brands now navigating the challenge of this data privacy piece and obviously the demise of cookies in Australia? Are they geared up for it, or are they still sort of a bit head in the sand?
Well, I think it's the same as any developed market. There are some solutions being built by various players across the ecosystem that will, help fill the gap, but there's no one single solution that will replace cookies at all, in its entirety. But, locally, there are some well-developed retail media networks, so that first-party data there obviously isn't going to be impacted. So on-site, no impact, but off-site, there will be challenges, I guess, reaching those customers again. But yeah, I mean, retail is just one part of the solution, really. A very, interesting one and, accountable one when it comes to driving sales for, brand selling online. But as part of the overall ecosystem, it can only, play that part. So we'll have to see how the regulations develop as well, because obviously there have been some more recent announcements that have, gone out to industry for feedback. So I'm sure there'll be some changes there as those evolve and as they take into account feedback from the likes of the IAB and different players across the industry. So it's a bit of a moving feast, even locally, aside from just the cookie deprecation coming next year. The regulatory landscape is obviously something that we don't know what it will look like, in a year or two.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about the IAB piece. Obviously, you're a founding member of the IAB Retail Media Committee. What standards do you believe are sort of paramount to establish in the industry, for it to be really taken seriously?
Yeah, so I think it's work in progress. Obviously, we've started this year with that committee, and it's a group across different retailers, different tech providers, agency people, brands themselves. So it is the right mix of contributors, and there just needs to be some standardization on which metrics are the key ones to measure on, and some form of ability to measure apples with apples across different networks. So I think some things that will be looked at will be, attribution windows. Should there be some common ones there? Obviously, they do vary by different categories, so there has to be, some adaptability in that as well. But if there's a way to have some focus there, and then just the reports that we get back from different retail media networks, like, again, retailers have the final say in terms of what transparency they're going to show in those reports, but maybe some key core metrics could be common across those as well. But yeah, it is very much a work in progress, as we've done some local research, the State of the Nation report, which is interesting to get sort of that feedback from the industry. And then we've had the US launch their retail media guide. So there'll be some localization of that, but obviously we want to make sure it's Australia specific as well in this market.
Tell me about that State of the Nation report then. I mean, what were the key sort of outputs of that?
So it was asking, people's opinions on, what they would expect from retail media, how they're finding it at the moment in terms of what's available locally, where the budgets are sort of aligned from. So there are obviously various different questions there, and really just getting the local buyers information on that and opinion on that. So that was people from agencies and people from brands. So answering that survey. But yeah, a good stake in the ground in terms of what people think in terms of the current setup. Yeah,
and then seeing how it evolves from there. Let's talk about that attribution and transparency piece. I mean, I think that's a great thing around the metrics. I think establishing that from the IAB, but taking it beyond those product sales, and into actually all of those things that a retailer can provide to a brand that a media owner does, from awareness to reach to, video views, dwell time on landing pages, all those sort of things. Are they taking those? Are they starting to move in that area, or is it still much more around clicks and bookings and product buys?
Well, I think the transactions, the closed loop reporting will always be the core or part of the core metric and input in that metric at least. But yeah, there'll be some version of a funnel as people go through. So broader and more awareness type placements will have, perhaps reach and frequency as a core metric. Whereas as you get further down the funnel towards, adding to baskets from a sponsored product placement, then that'll be much more focused on performance metrics, which are suitable to that placement. So, actual visits to the product page, adds to basket, and ultimately sales.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be some framework around that in terms of different metrics or the right metric for the right format. And yeah, I think that's kind of where we need to get to. There might be some more of the more traditional digital media verification that's required as well. So we're seeing, those third-party verification like Double Verify or IAS become integrated into retail media networks. And that's probably an important step, even though it is inherently a much safer environment and much more controlled than, say, the open web. It's still a good benchmark to have in place for, a brand to be confident about, whether their ads being seen, and obviously fraud and bot free.
Yeah, good. I mean, that's really good to hear. So tell us about events like Amazon Academy and Amazon Unboxed. You're obviously the first person to be certified in Australia. Tell me about these events and how they've sort of set the bar for disseminating industry knowledge, and then sort of how do you stay updated?
Yeah, that was more of an internal program working with them to help the agencies and the holdcos kind of get up to speed. So focused on getting staff, interested into all of the training programs and getting certified that way. Obviously introducing any new products to the team and making sure they're across the full sort of opportunities across the ecosystem. And yeah, really helping unlock opportunities and unlock new placements and new formats for brands that lie within those agencies. So it was about building a program around those and really, as the name applies, like unboxing Amazon as a relatively new player in the market at the time. So this was a few years ago, and really helping them kind of plug in with all of the key kind of teams across the agency.
Yeah, great. Okay. And how do you stay updated in this world? What are you reading, just for our purpose of our listeners? How do you do it? Yeah.
A good podcast is a nice format if you want to go deep on a topic, but no surprises like newsletters or LinkedIn and various trade press kind of. I try and keep it across a different mix. So whether it's sort of media and advertising trade press through to obviously retailer titles too.
Yeah.
Ad Exchange is always a good one from the US for the latest in terms of global tech kind of updates. Locally, sort of Power Retail is another good one. So yeah, lots of different places. And then once you've curated your feed in LinkedIn, then you should be getting what you've liked and followed coming straight to you.
So let's say we've only got a sort of few minutes left. So let's talk a little bit about the future. How do you see what that whole retail media piece might look, say, at the end of the decade? Let's fast forward 7 years to 2030. What might the landscape look like from a retailer point of view? How might the tech have evolved, with AI and things like that? What do you think?
Well, I think we're definitely going to get the three key areas covered, and most of them are now, but in a much more unified way. So if we think on-site search and banners, off-site into all of the various channels that could be as channels become digitized in the future as well. So we're thinking sort of programmatic video and display into CTV, perhaps audio even, and then in-store. And obviously the in-store piece, that's going to take a little bit longer to digitize, but there's already plenty of screens in stores, but you'll have digital shelving, digital end of aisle kind of placements, and all of those elements will become much more accessible, I'd imagine, much more, the ability to plan those in one place. I think, AI obviously will, and, tools to optimize within those channels will become, much more prevalent as well, and deliver, good outcomes in terms of being much more efficient. I think, obviously, with the changes in the landscape from a regulatory perspective, that clean room part of the landscape is going to become important. So you've got Amazon's Marketing Cloud, but there'll be third parties in there as well, helping any retailer really unlock the value of their data, but do it in a really privacy and compliant way. And that'll be an important one to then obviously push that data into different media environments where it can be used, and from a targeting perspective, but also measurement on the way back. So that's definitely a place I think it'll become important. And then there might be other ones which just are very nascent at the moment. But how do you manage your whole supply chain using retail media? If you have a glut of supply, then perhaps it can plug straight into retail media to drive sales of that product line. And equally, if you're out of stocks, then retail media often turns off there. But how do you manage that whole process is an interesting one I was reading about the other day. So I think there's definitely, all of those things where it then plugs into the broader retailers and brands ecosystem, and how it can add value there.
Yeah, very good. So for businesses that are just sort of entering this space, what are the kind of, it's probably two questions here. One is, what are the pain points that you're really seeing in there? And then what advice would you kind of give them to get, this thing up and running in a quick way?
So obviously working for technology companies more recently, I do feel like the technology piece is probably easier to solve these days, in the sense that there are built for purpose platforms to help a retailer set up a program. But I think, as you've probably heard in the industry, it's more than just the technology. You need to have buy-in from the top, but then the actual teams in place that understand this essentially a new business for a retailer. So retailers are very good at selling a product, and that's their core business. But becoming a media owner and having the relationships with the right teams to sell media into those teams and go after different budgets than you've had before in terms of marketing budgets versus maybe trade budgets that you're used to. That obviously needs a different perspective and probably a different experience set that can be learned, but perhaps would need some injection of resources or talent in there to make sure it's coming from an experienced place. So I think they're probably the challenges, and they're not insurmountable, but definitely areas to think about as you're building out your program. Tech's one thing, people is another, and then how you set the KPIs and the relationships between people, both internally but also with those JVPs externally, whether you're a retailer with brands or a retailer perhaps with the tech platform.
Yeah. Tell me a bit of, just finally before we end, just around the citrus ad piece. And are you seeing, is it still a case of retailers are taking that on as a ad serving and obviously for retail media tool, and therefore all the spend is still coming in to the retailer across that technology in their platforms? Or are you seeing now that there are brands coming to you directly in order to go across multiple retailers? How's that relationship evolving or working now? Am I making sense in terms of the question?
I think retailers are certainly coming to us for the technology to set up their own programs. I think the majority, to date, most of those have been a white label, if you like. So the technology is built for purpose and specific to that retailer. But we are seeing both in a number of different markets where network players are coming together, where the retailers perhaps are more numerous in their numbers, but smaller in their size. And therefore, to aggregate that across a network buy, it makes much more sense. Because, there are so many players that it's probably a small number of players that can build their own. There's a bigger number of players who can have their own retail media network and to attract advertisers. But then there gets to a point where there's just only so many a brand can handle and manage within their core team, and then it becomes helpful if there are ways to sort of reach an aggregate number of retailers that combined are actually quite an impressive offering, but individually would be difficult to manage.
That's interesting. So there's almost sort of a two-tier thing emerging, with the sort of almost like the old ad network piece underneath, and then the big players at the top. Amazing. Great, Roger. Look, I think we've hit our half hour, so I'm going to just say thank you immensely for enlightening our Retail Media Moguls podcast with your profound expertise. And look, we'd love you to come back at some point and tell us about how things are going, and probably a bit more about the Asia Pacific market once you've got your feet under the desk and your bum on the seat of the plane, I suppose. That would be great if you could come back and talk to us about that, and also how the IAB is developing things in Australia. It'd be really good if you might come and do that for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, really good to talk to you, and thanks for having me on. And yeah, I'll keep my ears open for the other episodes as well. Look forward to it.
Great, thanks, Roger. The Retail Media Moguls podcast is brought to you by Platform 195. To learn more about Platform 195 and how to connect retail media with intelligent marketing to accelerate growth, visit platform195.com. And then make sure to search for Retail Media Moguls in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Platform 195, thanks for listening.